The midnight recipe. I always thought that working the night shift at KFC was just a necessary evil, a mundane job to pay the bills while I figured out what I really wanted to do with my life. It was supposed to be straightforward. Take orders, fill boxes, clean up, and lock up at the end of the shift. The store was closed to customers after midnight, so it was mostly just me and my thoughts in the quiet, dimly lit kitchen. Little did I know that my routine was about to unravel into a nightmare. My manager, Mr. Thompson, was a man of few words. Tall, with a graying beard and a perpetually furrowed brow, he was the kind of person who rarely gave much away. His eyes were sharp, as if he was always assessing something beyond the immediate, and his silence often spoke volumes. That night, he seemed even more withdrawn than usual. As he handed me the keys to the store, his gaze lingered on the kitchen, and for a split second, I saw something in his eyes. Anxiety, perhaps, or maybe something darker. "Keep everything in order," he said gruffly, "and make sure you check the fridge." I nodded, dismissing it as typical manager paranoia. The fridge was always stocked with the usual ingredients: chicken, flour, spices. It was all routine, or so I thought. The clock struck midnight, and the silence of the empty store felt almost oppressive. I was scrubbing out the fryers when I heard a soft, almost imperceptible thud from the back room. My heart rate quickened, but I shook it off. It was probably just a loose box or something falling over. I walked to the back room, half expecting to find a piece of equipment out of place, or maybe a rodent scampering around. Instead, I found the room in its usual state. Disorganized, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. Just a clutter of cleaning supplies and empty boxes. As I turned to head back to the kitchen, I noticed a faint, unidentifiable smell wafting from the direction of the fridge. It was subtle at first, but grew stronger with each passing moment. I approached the fridge and opened the door, only to be met with a wave of putrid odor that nearly made me gag. The smell was something beyond the typical scent of old meat. It was overpowering, almost alive. Inside the fridge, everything seemed normal. The shelves were stocked with the usual items: crates of chicken, bags of flour, containers of spices. But then I noticed something unusual: a single unmarked container tucked away in the far corner of the fridge. It was a heavy, dark-colored vessel, and it was unlike anything we normally kept. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the container out, and the stench grew more intense. The container was filled with a dark, viscous liquid that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life. I could see the faint outline of something moving within it, though it was too murky to make out clearly. There was a small note stuck to the bottom of the container, written in a shaky, smudged script, not for human consumption. My stomach churned. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of special ingredient that got misplaced, but the smell was enough to convince me otherwise. I decided it was best to dispose of it. However, as soon as I moved the container, the power went out. The sudden plunge into darkness was jarring. The fridge light flickered and then died, leaving me in total blackness. I fumbled for my phone and turned on its flashlight, trying to illuminate the kitchen. The soft beam revealed a disorienting scene. The kitchen's familiar layout was now a jumble of eerie shadows and distorted shapes. I headed for the breaker box, located in a small utility room behind the kitchen. The whispering started as soon as I left the kitchen. It was faint at first, barely perceptible, but as I moved further away from the kitchen, it grew louder. It was a chorus of hushed murmurs, blending together into a chilling melody of dread. My flashlight beam flickered sporadically, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. I reached the utility room and tried to flip the breakers back on, but nothing happened. The whispering was now accompanied by a low, rhythmic thumping sound, as if something heavy was moving above me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel a cold sweat forming on my brow. With a growing sense of panic, I returned to the kitchen, where the whispering seemed to converge into a single unsettling voice. "You're not alone," it seemed to say over and over. I yanked open the fridge door, hoping to find some sign of normalcy, but the interior was still dark. The smell was overpowering, almost suffocating. I pulled the container out again, but it was now completely empty. Its contents mysteriously vanished. Desperation took over. I grabbed my jacket and tried to leave, but the front door was jammed. My heart raced as I pulled and pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, and I could sense a presence, something unseen, something waiting. I sank to the floor, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced through every horror story I'd ever heard, every urban legend about haunted places and cursed objects. The thumping from above had become a relentless drumbeat, echoing through the store. Then, as if in answer to my silent terror, a new sound emerged, a shrill, piercing noise that cut through the darkness like nails on a chalkboard. It felt as though something was scratching at the inside of the fridge, desperate to get out. I slammed the fridge door shut and backed away, my mind spinning. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, the power flickered back on. The lights returned, revealing the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The fridge door was closed, the container was back on the shelf, and everything seemed normal. It was as if the past few minutes had been a terrible hallucination. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when I noticed something chilling. The note was still on the container, but the handwriting had changed. It now read, "You shouldn't have looked." I fled the store in a state of shock, leaving the container behind. I never went back. The next day I heard through the grapevine that Mr. Thompson had mysteriously disappeared. His car was found abandoned in the parking lot, and he was never seen again. The store was shuttered for weeks, and when it reopened, no one spoke of the strange occurrences. To this day, every time I pass by that KFC, I can't shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent is waiting for the next person to open that fridge. And every time I hear about someone new working the night shift, I can't help but hope they don't uncover the secrets I found, or whatever else might be lurking in the shadows of that cursed store. One bucket, extra crispy. My name is Katie, and let me tell you, the night shift at KFC is no joke. I started working there to save up some cash for college, and I figured it'd be easy money. It was a typical Tuesday night, and I was halfway through my shift. The place was dead as usual, just me and my coworker Sam, who was mostly glued to his phone. The quiet was nice sometimes, but it also made the place feel like a ghost town. Around 11:30 p.m., things started getting weird. Sam was in the back, doing inventory, when the drive-thru bell dinged. I almost jumped out of my skin. Who comes to KFC this late on a weeknight? I put on my headset and hit the button. "Welcome to KFC, can I take your order?" Silence. I waited a few seconds and tried again. Still nothing. I was about to chalk it up to a glitch when a voice crackled through the speaker. "One bucket, extra crispy." It was a woman's voice, but there was something off about it. It sounded hollow, like she was speaking through a tunnel. I glanced at the drive-thru camera, but the screen was blank. Great, just my luck. "Could you please repeat that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "One bucket, extra crispy." the voice repeated. I took a deep breath and punched in the order. That'll be $15.99 at the window. No response. I shrugged it off and went to the window, but when I got there, no one was around. The drive-thru lane was completely empty. I leaned out, looking left and right, but there was nothing, just the dimly lit parking lot and the street beyond. "Hey, Sam," I called. "Weird stuff happening at the drive-thru." Sam ambled over, looking bored. "What now?" I explained what happened, but he just shrugged. "Probably just some kids messing with you. Happens all the time." Maybe he was right. I tried to shake it off and went back to cleaning the counters, but then the bell dinged again. My heart skipped a beat. I put on the headset, my hands shaking a little. "Welcome to KFC, can I take your order?" Silence again. Then the same voice, colder this time. "1 bucket, extra crispy." I glanced at Sam, who was now watching me with a frown. I repeated the order and went to the window, but again, no one was there. The lane was empty, but the air felt colder, like someone had left a door open. "This is seriously freaking me out," I muttered. Sam shook his head. "All right, I'll watch the camera this time. You take the order." We waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Just when I started to relax, the bell dinged. I nearly dropped the headset. Sam was glued to the monitor, his face pale. "Welcome to KFC, can I take your order?" I asked, my voice trembling. "1 bucket, extra crispy," the voice rasped. I looked at Sam. "Anything on the camera?" He shook his head, eyes wide. "Nothing. The lane's empty." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a prank. Something was seriously wrong. I grabbed my phone and texted our manager, Mike. He was a bit of a skeptic, but I didn't care. We needed backup. Mike showed up about 15 minutes later, looking annoyed. "What's going on?" We told him everything, but he just laughed. "You guys are jumping at shadows. It's probably just a glitch in the system. I'll take a look." He went into the back to check the equipment, leaving me and Sam alone. We sat in silence, waiting for the bell to ding again. I was gripping the counter so hard my knuckles were white. Then, without warning, all the lights went out. The place was plunged into darkness, and I heard Sam gasp. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The drive-thru bell dinged, echoing through the silence. "1 bucket, extra crispy," the voice hissed, louder than before. I backed away from the counter, my heart pounding. "Sam, we need to get out of here." But Sam was staring at something behind me, his eyes wide with terror. I turned slowly, the flashlight beam sweeping across the room. In the corner near the kitchen was a figure. It was a woman, but she was barely visible, more like a shadow with glowing eyes. I grabbed Sam's arm and bolted for the door. We stumbled outside, breathing hard. Mike was standing by his car, looking confused. "What the hell happened?" he asked. I tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come out. I just pointed to the drive-thru window, where the shadowy figure now stood watching us. Mike's face went pale. "We're closing up. Now." We locked the doors and left in a hurry. I never went back to that KFC. They said it was a wiring problem, that the cameras were faulty, but I knew better. Something was haunting that drive-thru, and I wasn't sticking around to find out what. Sometimes when I drive by late at night, I still see those glowing eyes in the window, and I wonder if it's waiting for someone else to take that order. 1 bucket, extra crispy. The Colonel's Secret. My name is Alex Monroe, and I'm a food blogger. I travel across the country uncovering hidden gems and culinary curiosities, documenting my experiences for my followers. My latest adventure took me to a small nondescript town called Greystone. I had heard whispers of a particularly eerie KFC in this town, a place where the fried chicken was said to be otherworldly good, but the atmosphere was sinister. Intrigued, I decided to pay a visit and see for myself what all the fuss was about. From the moment I arrived in Greystone, I felt a chill in the air. It wasn't just the cool breeze that rustled through the trees. It was the way the townspeople looked at me, with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The streets were unusually quiet, and the few people I saw hurried along, avoiding eye contact. The KFC stood at the edge of town, a dilapidated building that looked out of place among the quaint, old-fashioned shops and houses. The paint was peeling, and the sign creaked in the wind. As I walked closer, I noticed that the windows were covered in a thick layer of grime, making it impossible to see inside. My gut told me to turn around and leave, but my curiosity got the better of me. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, and the air was thick with the smell of fried chicken. The place was almost empty, save for a few patrons who sat in silence, eating their meals with a vacant look in their eyes. Behind the counter stood a tall, gaunt man with a stern expression. He watched me with cold, piercing eyes as I approached. "Welcome to KFC," he said in a monotone voice. "What can I get for you?" I glanced at the menu, which seemed outdated and worn. I decided to play it safe and ordered a classic meal fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and coleslaw. The man took my order without a word and disappeared into the back. As I waited, I looked around the restaurant. The walls were adorned with old photos and memorabilia, giving the place a nostalgic feel, but there was something off about the pictures. The people in them seemed too stiff, their smiles too forced. It was as if they were trying to hide something. The man returned with my tray, and I took a seat in a corner booth. The food looked and smelled amazing, but as I took my first bite, a wave of nausea washed over me. The chicken was unbelievably delicious, but there was an unsettling aftertaste that I couldn't quite place. Despite my unease, I finished my meal, driven by hunger and curiosity. By the time I left the restaurant, I felt a growing sense of dread. My stomach churned, and I felt lightheaded. As I walked back to my motel, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong with this place. That night, I lay in bed, my mind racing with thoughts of the creepy KFC. I knew I had to find out more about its history and the strange aura that surrounded it. My instincts told me that this was more than just an urban legend, and I was determined to uncover the truth. The next morning, I set out to explore Greystone. The town was small, with a population of maybe a few thousand. The main street was lined with charming shops and cafes, but there was an air of decay and neglect that lingered beneath the surface. The buildings were old, some of them boarded up and abandoned. As I walked, I noticed that the people I passed seemed wary of me. They averted their eyes and hurried along, as if afraid to speak to a stranger. I stopped at a local diner for breakfast, hoping to strike up a conversation with the locals and learn more about the town and its mysterious KFC. The diner was cozy and inviting, a stark contrast to the unsettling feeling that had been gnawing at me since I arrived. I took a seat at the counter and ordered a coffee and a stack of pancakes. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, brought my order and gave me a polite smile. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm new in town. Just passing through, actually. I couldn't help but notice that old KFC on the edge of town. It's got a bit of a unique atmosphere, doesn't it?" The waitress's smile faded, and she glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "You're not from around here, are you?" she whispered. I shook my head. No, just a food blogger. Heard some interesting stories about that place and thought I'd check it out. She sighed and looked around again, as if to make sure no one was listening. Listen. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from that place. It's been here forever, and it's always been strange. People go there, and they're never quite the same afterward. Some even disappear. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Disappear? What do you mean? She straightened up and shook her head. I've already said too much. Just be careful. Greystone has its secrets, and not all of them are meant to be uncovered. With that, she walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. I finished my breakfast in silence, pondering her words. Clearly, there was more to this town and its KFC than met the eye. I decided to visit the local library to see if I could dig up any information about the restaurant's history. The library was a small, dusty building, filled with old books and newspapers. I spent hours poring over the archives, searching for any mention of the KFC. What I found only deepened the mystery. There were several articles about unexplained disappearances over the years, all of them connected to the restaurant. The more I read, the more I realized that I was in over my head. As the sun began to set, I left the library with a sense of unease. The waitress's warning echoed in my mind, but my curiosity was too strong to ignore. I decided to visit the KFC one more time, determined to uncover its secrets. I arrived at the KFC just as the sky was turning a deep shade of orange. The building looked even more ominous in the fading light. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door and stepping inside. The atmosphere was just as unsettling as before. The same gaunt man was behind the counter, and the same vacant-eyed patrons were scattered around the dining area. I ordered a meal, this time opting for the chicken tenders, hoping they might taste different from the fried chicken I had before. As I waited for my food, I struck up a conversation with one of the patrons, a young woman who looked like she had seen better days. Her eyes were sunken, and her skin had a sickly pallor. "Hey," I said, trying to sound friendly. "I'm new in town, just checking out the local spots. How's the food here?" She looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "It's fine," she said quietly. "But you shouldn't be here. It's not safe." I leaned in closer. "What do you mean? What's going on with this place?" Before she could answer, the gaunt man appeared with my tray of food. He glared at the woman, who immediately fell silent and returned to her meal. I took my tray and found a seat in a corner booth, feeling the weight of his gaze on me the whole time. The chicken tenders were just as disturbingly delicious as the fried chicken, and once again, I felt a wave of nausea after eating. I forced myself to finish the meal, hoping to blend in and avoid drawing any more attention to myself. As I left the restaurant, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I hurried back to my motel, my mind racing with thoughts of the strange encounter and the unsettling food. I knew I had to dig deeper if I wanted to uncover the truth about this place. The next day, I decided to visit the town's historical society, hoping to find more information about the KFC and its dark history. The society was housed in an old, creaky building filled with dusty artifacts and faded photographs. I introduced myself to the curator, an elderly man named Mr. Whitaker. He seemed eager to help and led me to a back room filled with old records and documents. "What exactly are you looking for?" he asked as he rifled through the stacks of papers. "I'm trying to find out more about the KFC on the edge of town," I said. "I've heard some disturbing stories about it, and I'm curious about its history." Mr. Whitaker's expression grew serious. "Ah, that place. It has a dark past, that's for sure. It was built back in the 1980s, and ever since then, there have been strange occurrences and disappearances. Some say it's cursed. He handed me a stack of old newspaper clippings, and I spent the next few hours poring over them. The articles detailed a series of unexplained disappearances over the decades, all of them linked to the KFC. There were also reports of strange sightings and eerie phenomena in and around the restaurant. As I read, a pattern began to emerge. The disappearances seemed to happen in cycles every few years and always around the same time of year. I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread as I realized that the time for the next cycle was fast approaching. I thanked Mr. Whitaker for his help and left the Historical Society with a sense of urgency. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but I needed more concrete evidence. My next step was to visit the KFC after hours and see if I could uncover anything hidden within its walls. I waited until nightfall before making my way to the KFC. The town was eerily quiet, and the darkness seemed to swallow the light from the street lamps. I crept around to the back of the restaurant and found a side door that was slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, I slipped inside. The interior was even more unsettling in the dark. The dim emergency lights cast long shadows on the walls, and the silence was oppressive. I moved cautiously, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I made my way to the kitchen, where I hoped to find something that would explain the strange occurrences. As I searched through the cabinets and drawers, I came across a hidden door behind a shelf of supplies. My heart pounded as I pushed it open and descended a narrow staircase into the basement. The basement was cold and damp, with a faint metallic smell that made my stomach churn. As I explored, I found old, rusted equipment and stacks of yellowed papers. At the far end of the room, I discovered a large, locked freezer. With some effort, I managed to pry it open. Inside, I found rows of jars filled with strange, unidentifiable substances. There were also several old notebooks, their pages filled with handwritten notes and diagrams. I flipped through one of them and felt a chill run down my spine as I read about bizarre experiments involving the chicken and various chemicals. The notes detailed attempts to enhance the flavor of the food in ways that defied all logic and reason. As I read, I heard voices coming from upstairs. I quickly hid behind a stack of boxes and listened. The voices belonged to the gaunt manager and another man, their conversation hushed and urgent. "We can't keep this up much longer," the manager said. "People are starting to ask questions." "We have no choice," the other man replied. "The Colonel's legacy must be preserved. The formula is too valuable." I strained to hear more, but their voices faded as they moved away. I waited until I was sure they were gone before creeping back up the stairs and out of the building. My mind raced with what I had discovered. The Colonel's secret recipe was more than just a marketing ploy. It was the key to something dark and sinister. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I returned to the KFC the next day, posing as a health inspector. The gaunt manager eyed me suspiciously, but allowed me access to the kitchen and basement. As I pretended to inspect the facilities, I kept my eyes peeled for any new clues. In the basement, I found another hidden door, this one leading to a small windowless room. Inside, I discovered a series of disturbing photographs and documents that revealed the true extent of the experiments being conducted. The food was being laced with mind-altering substances designed to create addiction and compliance among the customers. Before I could leave, the manager caught me. He dragged me to the hidden room and locked the door behind us. "You shouldn't have come back," he hissed, his eyes burning with anger. "You've seen too much." I struggled to free myself, but he was too strong. Just as he was about to inject me with a syringe filled with an unknown substance, I managed to knock it out of his hand. and deliver a well-aimed kick to his stomach. He doubled over, and I seized the opportunity to escape. I ran up the stairs and out of the building, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my car. As I drove away, I could see the gaunt manager standing at the entrance, watching me with a look of pure hatred. I left Greystone that night, vowing never to return. I published my story, detailing the horrors I had uncovered at the KFC, but I knew that the real truth would remain hidden. The restaurant was shut down, and the manager disappeared, but the memory of what I had seen haunted me. Months passed, and I tried to move on with my life. But every time I saw a KFC, I felt a pang of fear and dread. I knew that the Colonel's secret was still out there, waiting to claim its next victim. One night, as I was lying in bed, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm and measured. "You shouldn't have meddled in things you don't understand," the voice said. "The Colonel's legacy is eternal. We will find you." The line went dead, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew then that I would never truly be free from the horrors of Greystone. The Colonel's secret had become a part of me, and I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. The Haunting of KFC. My name is Henry, and I've lived in this small town for as long as I can remember. There's not much to do around here, and jobs are scarce. So when I saw the Help Wanted sign in the KFC window, I jumped at the opportunity. The manager, a stern but fair woman named Karen, hired me on the spot. My first shift was set for the following Monday. Monday night rolled around, and I arrived at the KFC just before 10 p.m. Karen was there to show me the ropes. She gave me a quick tour of the place, pointing out where everything was and explaining my duties. The restaurant was eerily quiet after the dinner rush, and I couldn't help but feel a slight chill in the air. "All right, Henry, you think you got everything?" Karen asked, her eyes glancing around as if she was expecting something to jump out at us. "Yeah, I think so. Just serve any late-night customers, clean up, and close the place down by 2 a.m., right?" "That's right. Just make sure you keep an eye on things. This place can get a little strange at night." I laughed it off, thinking she was just trying to scare the new guy. Little did I know, she wasn't joking. My first few nights went by without incident. The occasional late-night customer would stumble in, usually drunk or high, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was around the end of my first week that things started to get weird. It was a slow night, and I was in the back washing dishes when I heard the door chime. I dried my hands and headed to the front, expecting to see a customer. The dining area was empty, and the door was closed. I frowned, thinking maybe I had imagined the sound. As I turned to go back to the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moving near the drink machine. My heart skipped a beat, but when I looked directly at it, there was nothing there. "Hello? Anyone there?" I called out, feeling a bit foolish. No response. I shook my head and went back to the kitchen, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Over the next few nights, the strange occurrences became more frequent. I would hear footsteps in the dining area when no one was there, and sometimes the door chime would go off, even though the door hadn't been opened. One night, as I was mopping the floor, I heard a faint whispering coming from the back storage room. I stopped what I was doing and listened. The whispering continued, indistinct and eerie. I took a deep breath and slowly walked towards the storage room. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The whispering stopped abruptly, and the room fell silent. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, before deciding to investigate. I opened the door to the storage room and flicked on the light. The room was empty, just shelves of supplies and boxes. I closed the door and went back to mopping, my nerves on edge. I couldn't explain what was happening, but I knew it wasn't normal. One night, about a month into my job, I had a particularly unsettling experience. It was around midnight, and I was taking out the trash. The back alley behind the KFC was dark and creepy, but I had gotten used to it. As I was throwing the last bag into the dumpster, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the end of the alley. I froze, my heart racing. The figure was tall and shadowy, and I couldn't make out any features. "Hey, who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing off the brick walls. The figure didn't move or respond. I took a step closer, trying to get a better look. As I did, the figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, disappearing completely. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I had just seen. It couldn't have been a trick of the light. It was too clear. I quickly finished taking out the trash and hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. The next day, I decided to talk to Karen about what I had been experiencing. Maybe she knew something about the strange occurrences. "Hey, Karen, can I ask you something?" I said as we sat in the office going over the schedule. "Sure, what's up?" "Have you ever noticed anything weird happening here at night?" Karen's expression grew serious. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I was wondering when you were going to ask. You're not the first one to notice. This place has a history." "What do you mean?" "Years ago, before this building was a KFC, it was an old diner. There was a fire, and a few people died. Ever since then, strange things have been happening here, especially at night." Fear gripped my heart. "So, you think it's haunted?" Karen nodded. "I've seen and heard things myself. I've had employees quit because they were too scared to work here. I didn't want to tell you right away because I didn't want to freak you out. But I guess you've seen enough to know something's not right." I didn't know what to say. On one hand, it was a relief to know I wasn't losing my mind. But on the other hand, knowing the place was haunted didn't exactly make me feel better. Things only got worse after my conversation with Karen. It was as if acknowledging the hauntings had made them more active. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker, and the whispering voices became more frequent. One night, as I was closing up, I heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen. I ran back to see what had happened and found that all the pots and pans had been thrown off the shelves. They were scattered across the floor, as if someone or something had deliberately thrown them. I stood there, my heart pounding, when suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath in the cold air. I felt a presence behind me, and before I could turn around, I was pushed forward, stumbling into the mess of pots and pans. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the kitchen, not daring to look back. I grabbed my phone and called Karen. "Karen, something is happening. I can't do this anymore." "Calm down, Henry. Take a deep breath. I'll be there in a few minutes." Karen arrived shortly after, and we sat in the dining area as I told her what had happened. She listened intently, her face pale. "Henry, I think it's time we called in some help. I know a guy who specializes in this sort of thing. He might be able to help us figure out what's going on." A few days later, Karen introduced me to Mark, a local paranormal investigator. He was a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor and a bunch of equipment that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie. "Nice to meet you, Henry. Karen's told me about the activity here. I'm going to set up some equipment tonight and see if we can capture any evidence." Mark spent the next few hours setting up cameras, audio recorders, and other devices around the restaurant. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Maybe we would finally get some answers. As the night went on, Mark and I watched the monitors, waiting for something to happen. Around midnight, the temperature in the dining area dropped, and the lights flickered. Mark's equipment started to go off, detecting changes in electromagnetic fields and capturing strange noises. "Do you hear that?" Mark asked, pointing to one of the audio monitors. I listened closely and heard the faint whispering again. It sounded like multiple voices, all speaking at once, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Mark frowned. "This place definitely has some activity. I'm going to try and communicate with whatever's here." He pulled out a device called a spirit box, which scans radio frequencies and supposedly allows spirits to communicate. Mark turned it on, and the static filled the room. "Is anyone here with us?" Mark asked. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then a voice came through, faint and distorted, but unmistakable. "Help us." Mark and I looked at each other, stunned. He continued asking questions, and the spirit box responded sporadically with words and phrases that seemed to tell a story. "Fire. Trapped. Can't leave." The more we listened, the more it became clear that the spirits haunting the KFC were those who had perished in the fire. Mark turned off the spirit box, his face grim. "Henry, it looks like these spirits are stuck here, unable to move on because of the tragic way they died. We need to help them find peace." "But how do we do that?" I asked, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "There's a few ways we can go about it. We could try a cleansing ritual to help them move on, or we could try to uncover more about their identities and what might be holding them here." We decided to start by learning more about the fire and the people who died in it. Over the next few days, Mark and I delved into the town's archives, searching for any information about the diner and the fire. We discovered that the fire had happened over 50 years ago, in 1968. The diner had been a popular local hangout, and the fire had started in the early morning hours, trapping several people inside. The official report stated that the cause of the fire was never determined, but rumors and whispers suggested it might have been arson. We found the names of the people who had died in the fire: James, a cook; Lily, a waitress; and 2 customers, Sarah and Michael. Their stories were tragically cut short, and it seemed like their spirits were now haunting the place where they had met their end. Armed with this information, Mark and I decided to try a cleansing ritual to help the spirits move on. We gathered the necessary supplies: sage, candles, and holy water, and prepared for the ritual. We chose a quiet night when the KFC was closed to perform the ritual. Karen, who was skeptical but supportive, agreed to let us use the restaurant after hours. As midnight approached, we began setting up the candles and lighting the sage. Mark started the ritual by invoking a prayer for the dead, asking for their spirits to find peace and move on from this world. As he chanted, the air grew colder and the lights flickered. I felt a presence around us, watching, waiting. "Spirits of James, Lily, Sarah, and Michael," Mark called out. "We are here to help you find peace. You are no longer bound to this place. It is time for you to move on." For a moment, there was silence. Then the faint whispering started again, growing louder and more distinct. The voices seemed to be responding to Mark's words, and I could feel the tension in the air. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the dining area, extinguishing the candles. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath in the cold air. Mark continued chanting, his voice steady despite the growing intensity. "Go towards the light. Find your peace," he urged. The wind stopped as abruptly as it had started, and the whispering faded away. The air grew warmer, and a sense of calm settled over the room. It was as if a weight had been lifted. In the days following the ritual, the activity at the KFC diminished significantly. The strange noises, moving objects, and whispering voices all but disappeared. It seemed like the spirits had finally found the peace they needed to move on. I continued working the night shift, but the atmosphere was different now. The eerie, oppressive feeling that had hung over the place was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. Even Karen noticed the change and thanked Mark and me for what we had done. Despite the newfound peace, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sadness for the spirits who had been trapped there for so long. Their lives had ended tragically, but at least now they were free. One night, a few weeks after the ritual, I had a dream. I was back in the diner, but it was whole and bustling with life. I saw James behind the counter flipping burgers and Lily serving customers with a smile. Sarah and Michael sat at a booth, laughing and talking. They all turned to me, their faces kind and grateful. James stepped forward and spoke, his voice clear and warm. "Thank you, Henry. You've given us the peace we never thought we'd find. We can finally move on." I woke up with tears in my eyes, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. It was a final farewell, a confirmation that the spirits had truly moved on. Life went on, and so did my job at the KFC. The restaurant was just a restaurant now, no longer haunted by the restless spirits of the past. I stayed on the night shift, finding a strange comfort in the quiet hours of the early morning. I never forgot the events that had unfolded or the people whose spirits we had helped. Their story became a part of the town's history, a reminder of the past, and a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. And as for me, I found a sense of purpose in my work, knowing that sometimes, even in the most unexpected places, we can make a difference in ways we never imagined. The Hidden Room. Hey, I'm Max, and I've been working at this old KFC for about 6 months now. It's an easy job, and it gives me plenty of time to focus on my art when I'm not at work. The place has a reputation for being a bit creepy, but I never paid much attention to the rumors. That all changed one night. It was a Tuesday, and the dinner rush had just ended. We were about to close up for the night, and it was just me and my coworker James finishing up the last of the cleaning. The storm outside had been raging for hours, and the wind howled as it rattled the windows. We were joking around, trying to distract ourselves from the eerie atmosphere. James was mopping the dining area while I took out the trash. When I came back in, I noticed a door in the back hallway that I'd never seen before. It was slightly ajar, and a faint light was coming from inside. "Hey, James, did you know about this door?" I called out. He looked up from his mopping, frowning. "Nope, never noticed it before. Maybe it's a maintenance room or something." "Want to check it out?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. "Sure, why not? Beats cleaning up this place," James replied, putting the mop aside. We walked over to the door, and I pushed it open wider. The light was coming from a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the small room. It looked like a storage area, but something about it felt off. The air was colder, and there was a faint smell of something rotten. As we stepped inside, we saw a trapdoor in the floor. "This is weird," James muttered, kneeling down to inspect it. "Who puts a trapdoor in a KFC?" "I don't know, but let's find out," I said, grabbing the handle and pulling it open. A set of narrow stairs led down into darkness. We exchanged uneasy glances but couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. "Should we really be doing this?" James asked, hesitating at the top of the stairs. "Come on. Where's your sense of adventure?" I teased, taking the first step down. He sighed and followed me. The stairs creaked under our weight, and the further we descended, the colder it got. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a long, narrow hallway at the bottom. The walls were damp, and the floor was covered in dirt and debris. We walked cautiously. The sound of our footsteps each eye pushed it open, and we stepped into a large, dimly lit room. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with strange objects, old books, jars of what looked like preserved organs, and other unidentifiable items. In the center of the room was a large wooden table with an ancient-looking book lying open on it. "This is some seriously creepy stuff," James whispered, looking around. "Yeah, no kidding," I replied, approaching the table. The book was filled with symbols and drawings that I couldn't understand. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something deeply unsettling about the place. Suddenly, we heard a noise behind us. We turned around to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "What are you doing here?" a raspy voice demanded. We didn't mean to intrude," I stammered, taking a step back. The figure moved closer, its eyes never leaving us. "This place is forbidden. You must leave now." "Okay, we're going," James said quickly, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the door. As we hurried back down the hallway, the figure's voice echoed behind us. "You have seen too much. You cannot escape." We bolted up the stairs and slammed the trapdoor shut behind us. We didn't stop running until we were outside, the storm raging around us. We jumped into my car and sped away, our hearts pounding. The next day, we reported what we had found to the manager, but when we went back to the KFC to show him, the door was gone. The hallway and the room we had discovered had vanished, as if they had never existed. The manager looked at us like we were crazy and told us to get back to work. James and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled onto something we weren't meant to see. We quit our jobs soon after and never went back to that KFC. But the nightmares still haunt me. And sometimes, late at night, I hear that raspy voice whispering in the darkness, reminding me that some secrets are better left buried, 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 better left buried.